So today I am working with stuff from chapter 5, which is basically how to take the dart and to turn it into something else. As long as we are only working with the amount of fabric that the dart takes out, we can turn it into any number of things to control the fit of the garment. It'll all still fit exactly the same. It's just going to get sewn a little bit differently. So I can turn the dart into a pleat, and the pleat will just fold shut and it'll still point to the bust point. Or I could turn the dart into gathers and it would still point towards the bust point. I could even turn the dart into a different seam line, which we will do in the next module. But for this module, I'm just going to show how to transform this dart into either pleats or gathers, and it'll still fit the exact same way. I'm not adding fullness. I'm keeping everything fitting exactly the same way. I'm just using a different method of fitting rather than the dart. So we've got different fitting devices. We've got the dart, we've got pleats, we've got gathers, and we've got seam lines. So this is just how to change the dart into either gathers or pleats. So I'm going to start out with the pleats. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this. So let me bring that up a little bit so you can see it a bit better. So I'm going to move the dart into two different locations on the shoulder. One here and one here. Two different locations on the shoulder. And then I'm just going to turn them into pleats. So I want you to mimic this for your assignment, this as well as the gathers that I'm going to show. And so for this, what I did was I found the halfway point on the shoulder, and then I've gone 1/2 inch on either side, so they're 1 inch apart. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to move my dart up to the shoulder using the pivot method. I'm using bigger paper this time than I have in the past, just so I have more space to work with. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by tracing the interior dart leg along the bottom, up the front, around the neckline, and to the first notch. Not notch, but the first little spot that I want to move the dart. Now I want half the dart to go in there, so I need to figure out how much half my dart is. I'm going to measure the opening at the bottom, divide it in half. I'm going to close the dart just that far. I'll start where I left off up here and trace the inch between up above. I'll close the rest of my dart, and then I'll trace from my final spot all the way around, pulling in my notch on the underarm, and finish the rest so that I end up with both my dart moving to two different locations up on the shoulder. They're still pointing at the bust point, and it's been closed down below. That way everything is kept nice and tidy. Then what I'm going to do, since I'm using pleats, I don't actually have to draw in dart legs. I do need to perfect it, so I might just draw one line here, just a very faint line, just to help me with folding my pleats so that I know how they're going to look. So I've drawn those in, and I'm going to fold these just like I perfect a dart. But this time, I might not necessarily have them fold towards center front with perfecting a dart. I might have them go out to the side. I'm just going to think about which direction I want my pleats to face and open up. And I think I still want them to go towards center front because it's going to be slanting down. If I pleat them going the other direction, you might get stuff in it. So I'm going to still start by folding this interior leg. And go about as though I'm perfecting this as a dart. Once it's closed, I can add my seam allowance right over the top of that. I'm just adding a 1/4 inch because at full size it'd be 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to cut that off. So it looks very similar to a dart. But now I need to do the same thing for the second plate. And lots of crinkling paper. And there's the second pleat. Fill in my seam allowance. And I have my second pleat. Now, because this is a pleat, I don't need all of this exterior, like these interior lines. I don't need them at all, so I'm just going to get rid of them. If I had slashed and spread everything up to there, I could have just X'd everything out. But now all I need to do is indicate on here my notches. And then this is what makes a pleat different than a dart. Well, one of the ways it makes it different. Number one, I don't have any information in here. Number two, I draw a little arrow indicating how it gets folded. So I am going to take this point and fold it this direction. If I folded it this other direction, if I put the arrow pointing the other way, all of the excess fabric would get pointing to the outside. But because of the direction I have the arrow pointing, it means the fabric's going to go towards the center. Same thing with the other one. Draw a little arrow indicating that this notch gets taken to this notch. This notch gets taken to this notch. That's all the information you need to indicate a pleat. You just need the notches. You need your notches with an arrow. So just make your notches nice and visible. Come back in. I'm going to put this on a fold, which means I do not need seam allowance at center front. I need those 3 little dots because that's going to indicate that this is my grain line as well. And then I'll go ahead and fill in the seam allowance on the rest of the garment. And then I can go ahead and cut it all out. Go in and clean up any extra little details like that. Shouldn't be down there. Make sure it's nice and smooth across there. Finish filling in all of your notches. Make sure your grain line is present and any other labeling that needs to happen. So this is DJR 21 0003. This is my 3rd pattern, and this is fall. This is a shoulder pleat. That's the name for this pattern, at least for me. You can choose to name it something else if you want to. And this is my bodice front. This is a size 8. I only need one of it in the self fabric, and this is pattern piece number 1. There is the first sample for this tutorial. Now let's do another sample. For the second sample, make sure your sketches are a little bit more tidy than mine. I'm going to move the dart from down below, and I think I'm going to move it up into the armhole. So here's my bust point. I'm going to move it up here, and this is all going to turn into gathers, coming from the armhole going down towards the bust point. So this tutorial is about, this part of the tutorial is about moving the dart and turning it into gathers. So I'm going to use the pivot method again. And I'm going to stick it right where this notch is in the underarm. So I'm going to begin by tracing my pattern. I'll pull in that shoulder notch for reference and come to the underarm notch. And then I'm going to close my dart, go to the underarm notch, and finish tracing the rest of my pattern. So my dart has now been moved to the underarm, right here. I can get rid of this little notch down below. It's not important anymore. Here's my center front, here's my grain line. You can, just so long as you remember, and it doesn't matter if you add them now or later, I might as well just stick it in now. There's my notch on the shoulder. This is gonna be DJR 210004 for fall. This is going to be underarm gathers. And then this is going to be my bodice front. It's a size 8. I only need one of it, and self. And there's only one pattern piece for this pattern. So now let me go in and I can finish. Make sure you know where your bust point still is, because we're going to use that. We're going to go in and we're going to turn this into gathers. Now with gathers, we're taking all of the fabric here and we're condensing it. So I'm not actually going to be able to close this completely up because there's going to be a whole bunch of fabric that gets squished together here. So I actually need to give a little bit more space for the gathering of that fabric. And to do that, I'm going to go about, you know, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. I'm going to go 1/2 inch on one side and 1/2 inch on the other side. And I'm just going to turn these into notches. And the gathering is going to occur between this notch and this notch. We'll get rid of this point and this point in this process. But we still need to figure out how this is going to get shaped. And since I'm not folding it down or folding it up or anything, I can't perfect this like I did a dart or like I did a pleat. But it's all pointing at this bust point, and it's going to need to stay smooth along this line. And to do that, I'm just going to measure from the bust point over to the first, to one of the points. And that is, at least for me, that's about 2.5. So I'm going to keep that measurement. And I'm just going to pivot from the bust point and make a smooth line that blends between the two of them. So it's going to be this interesting wave shape. But once it gets gathered, that's going to completely smooth out and fit perfectly. I can get rid of these other little points of reference so that all I have left is 2 notches, and I just have to draw a little bracket between the two of them and say I used 1/2 inch here and added 1/2 inch here, so I need this section to fit within 1 inch. So I'm going to just write in gather to 1 inch. I can get rid of my bust point because I don't need it anymore. And this pattern will now give me this. That's all it takes. Just give a little bit of extra space for the gathers to fit in, blend through everything, and then just indicate what is going to be gathered to. So now I can come back in and do all my seam allowance and cut it out. Go ahead and cut it out. When you're done for today's tutorial, you've got two different patterns to turn into me. You've got one with the pleats and you've got one with the gathers. This is what you need to turn in for this module. That's it. Make sure that you have all of your notches. Make sure you have some grain and fold line mentioned. Center front, as well as all of the labeling that you need. And that's it.